Hello, Education 3. I'll call it myself. Hello, Education 523. Hope you're having a good day. Coming to you from a cold and windy Saturday in my home office. Uh, we're going to jump into everything here in 1 minute. I did want to do a couple small announcements. One, all the stuff that's been posted so far, mainly discussion one and the intros, have been great. I should have all of that up to date and graded no later than Monday morning, but I just wanted to give a little bit of acknowledgement since I've been reading them, and all the grades should be posted here in a few days until it's the weekend. Um, Next thing, I don't want to forget to mention this, and hopefully I'll put it out in an email also next week. But I will be out of town on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 19th through the 22nd. I'm at a conference in Florida. I'm presenting a paper. Not that you care or are wondering about that. I just wanted you to know that my response on emails might be a little bit delayed. I'm going to have an auto response up on Thursday through Sunday, but just in case, I wanted to tell you I'm definitely going to still be checking my email. It might only be one or two times a day, but if there is an emergency, please feel free to email me. The other thing is, I'm going to normally we run from Monday 12:01 through Sunday 11:59. I'm going to actually leave everything open just to make sure I have the right day. It will be the 23rd. I'll leave everything this week open until the 23rd, just in case someone would have to stop by my office or email me about something and I was not quick in response. My two big travel days are going to be Thursday and Sunday. And if anyone has an issue on Sunday, I want to make sure I can help you in more realistically give you time to submit if I don't get back in time with you on Sunday morning or Sunday evening. I think I'm still coming back on Sunday evening, so I'm a little spotty on that. But long story short, out of town, I'm going to make sure that everything is open though until Monday. And when I mean Monday 11:59, that'll be a 1 week thing, but I just think it's fair, and it's I'm the one leaving, not you all, so I want to make sure you have enough time in case you have any questions or anything like that. Enough about me. Let's talk about the content. This is our first real video, and I usually do these. I know this is an asynchronous course, but I do think it's important to have a little bit of face to face. And some of it will be me just rehashing some of the readings and just kind of talking about things. I also try to keep these videos as short as I possibly can because I know I think, what is it? You're not supposed to do over 10, 15-minute videos. People lose interest. I might go over that a little bit today because I wanted to mention a few things from chapter one and chapter two, but I'm not going to go too in depth on anything. And I'll show you how I did this setup. I'm trying a few new things with these asynchronous classes this semester. It may work, it may not, but we'll give it a go. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and log in to our class. Didn't even do that yet. And forgive me, I am recording at home. Sometimes the Zoom gets a little quirky here. I don't know why. It'll freeze every once in a while. So hopefully it will not do that while I'm talking, or sometimes it'll just freeze on my face and do the voice. I'm going to give that a little, I guess, alert. All righty. All righty. Well, this week, just to kind of rehash what we're going to do, we're going to mostly talk about chapters 3 and 4. That's your readings for this week. And I'm going to give a little bit of an overview on my thoughts on what the readings were. And then it's money and education, I guess, is kind of the title I gave to it. But I think it's a lot more than that. I have also put up a video on Linda Daring Hammond. Rate, where is that video? Ah, there it is. It's about 7 minutes long. She talks about the book a little bit and some of the themes. I thought it was pretty nice, especially if I get a little quick in what I'm saying, if you wanted to check that out. Also, being a graduate course, she is an educational heavyweight, and I thought it was someone that we might want to touch base on. I think I said that last week in the first video, but she is definitely on the pantheon. I think she almost became education secretary on the Obama administration. I know she was a finalist. So with that being said, if you want to hear a little more about the book, there is a 7-minute video that's up. The only assignment that's due this week is discussion 2. Next week, the Zen assignment is due. I will go over that for a few minutes here at the end as to what's expected. I'll talk about that on the next video too, but if you want to go ahead and work ahead a little bit, that is no problem. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the content. I am just going to pull that up and I'll tell you kind of how I'm going to do this. I was going to do a PowerPoint and then I was like, I know how I am with PowerPoints. I'll get very wordy and just explode into like an hour and a half type thing. It's an asynchronous class, so I want to try to keep this short and sweet as much as I can, but still talk about the themes that we need to talk about. So what I have done, I'm assuming everyone in this class is probably an educator or soon to be an educator or has been an educator. And one thing I used to do when I taught middle school was the 3-2-1 exit tickets, three things that you learned. Gosh, I'm a little rusty on this. Three things you learned, two things that you want to know a little more about, and usually one question that you had. That's how I approached it. What I've done with each chapter is I wanted to write down three big themes that I got from the chapter. May not be what you got, but it's what I got. I would say two facts or general information. I have to admit, I cheated a little bit. Sometimes I put three if it's something that I think might just need referencing because of our class. And then usually the big question that I have at it. So I thought I would just hit these with the first four chapters today and just kind of talk about it. Chapters 1 and 2, I'm going to kind of buzz through because I think there wasn't anything too groundbreaking in there. But I think it's important that we at least acknowledge it, especially because your discussion topic was related to that last week. So the first thing that Hammond is trying to approach, or what the book, The Flat World in Education, is trying to kind of get into, basically, this is probably not anything groundbreaking to anyone in this class, but we have an antiquated approach to how we design school systems. She gets into the point that it's based on old factory systems, which I think by and large is very much true. Even if you think things like daylight savings times and all that. And the problem with, in case you're wondering why I said that, the old farmer times and things like that, revert back. With this antiquated system and how we set everything up, it doesn't play to all the groups, and it especially doesn't benefit maybe students in certain settings or the modern day students. So again, I don't think that was a big groundbreaking theme, but our system is, I don't want to say broken, that's not the right word, but it's definitely dated in some aspects. She's also for, expansion or overhaul on certain things of teaching styles, assessments, curriculum. I think that's things we're always trying to do. I'm sure you all, again, if you're teaching or have been teaching, you go to PDs and things like that, but different approaches to the way we do it. And again, this highlights not only just, you want to have a teaching style that's not just geared to a certain group set of students, but you want to have something that's more expansive. I'm going to share some curriculum that I have or some articles on some things that we can maybe talk about too in some of the later classes. I might highlight it today though too, if I have time. The next one, and actually I'll come back to this. This is a little bit what the discussion topic is going to be on, but how everything with education has become so politicized, and sometimes it limits efforts of reform and best practice approaches. So, and I think it's related to my big question, but I think this book, and I guess I should go ahead and it's down at the bottom where she mentions No Child Left Behind. You can tell this book is about a little over 10 years old. I like it because I think the themes are still the same, but No Child Left Behind is an older policy. It's basically gone now. But still, I think the problems that she's addressing in here are very much modern problems. But when she wrote this, it's a pre-COVID world. Obviously, I think the world of education is much more politicized post-pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. And I think the term I use in the discussion is it's more hyper-politicized. So that's not obviously an adjacent term. That's a term that's used a lot. Those were kind of the themes I got from chapter 1. Some things related to just general information. I think some of this you all might already know, but I just wrote it down because I thought they were important things. In case you're not familiar with the Great Society, hopefully you got this as a social studies teacher in your high school modern US classes, but that was President Johnson's program of social programs. There was a lot of education, civil rights bills were in there, Medicaid, things like that, things to, try to pull up or make more equality throughout the US population. That was the Great Society. It was a 1960s program. Also, she references this in the book a few times, is the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act. That was from 1975. And again, that's the guarantee of a free, appropriate public education for every child with a disability in every state. You got to make things accommodating. And of course, one that gets referenced throughout this book is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that also is tied in with President Johnson. This is kind of connected to the Great Society, but it was basically the concept that the full educational opportunity should be our national goal, i.e., it kind of relates to the Jefferson quote that she has at the beginning of this chapter of chapter 2. But the Elementary and Secondary Act is the big one. That's most policies all trace back to that, and actually are referenced. So just to kind of give that overview. I'm sorry, I said this quote, the Jefferson quote. That quote is actually in chapter 2, not chapter 1. But you've already read that, so you know. All right. Big question that I have from chapter 1. I mentioned this already, but how do you eliminate the politicization? Gosh, it's Saturday. I can't spit that out. How do you eliminate the politics within education in a hyper political world, especially post COVID? I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer, but I think we would be kidding ourselves if we don't say politics right now are playing a large role into how everything's decided in education. Maybe for better or for worse, I don't know everyone's political stance. Our discussion topic this week is actually going to talk about how do you get change through beneficial change in this hyper political setting right now. And I'm not going to pretend to have answers, but I do want to make this point. When you're on the discussion board, I don't know everyone's political allegiance. Honestly, I'm not too worried about it, but just make sure you're always respectful in how you post things. You don't have to respond to anyone, but still don't attack too much, but be real. I guess that's self-explanatory. Chapter 2, it's basically just a deep dive into the education and how it developed and why it's so imbalanced. And of course, I think at this point, to kind of get into the multicultural aspects of this, when we're talking imbalance, we're talking socioeconomic, we're talking along racial lines, things of that nature. She makes the point a lot of times in this book, and you can tell she's a very much a policy-driven person. But a lot of the things that she's talking about are, of course, economic, socioeconomic, the funding and resources in African American dominated schools, Latino schools, Native American schools she makes reference to. So why did this happen? And she kind of starts to look into that. And that's going to be a theme throughout the book. Also, she has 5 factors for why these actually have happened. And actually, I thought that was actually interesting, and she put them on there. I won't read them word for word, but well, actually, I will. I think they're pretty good. But there's high levels of poverty plus low levels of social support. That's a big one. Limited resources. This is the one I was kind of built to, and this is why I wanted to read it. High quality teachers in all communities. She gets into certification programs and different types of certification. I just want to make note, one, there's a lot of thought on that. And just speaking in our area in Berkeley, in Jefferson County, especially Berkeley, I know there's a teacher shortage, and sometimes you got to look for creative ways to get teachers in the classroom. So is that good for the students? Is it bad for the students? Or is there really nothing you can do? It's things we have to think about. And I will say at Shepherd, we're looking at ways to help people get certified. We're looking into alternative certifications. She talks about that. I can only speak from my own experience. I was actually a history major, and it was a little different time. I graduated in the mid 90s. But I went to WVU and got my teaching certification, but it wasn't in, I would say, well, it was traditional, but not really traditional, because I did it as an MAT student, which I think a lot of people in this class may be. And I think I came out stronger for it because I was strong in content, and then I got a lot of education experience. I don't know how she would classify that, because I don't know if I had quite the same buildup as undergrads might have had. But it was a little bit different time. And then I know now, especially in some fields, math, science, we need math and science teachers. And sometimes you just have to put people in there. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know. But she talks about that a little bit, and the correlations with where teachers who would be considered high quality are usually in suburban areas when maybe they're needed in these other environments. And again, that kind of gets into curriculum. I posted something up. She gets into the curriculum, and I'm going to get into this a little bit farther down, but she does talk about maybe less is more, and not subject areas per se, but maybe the curriculum within those subject areas. And of course, she talks about that factory model design, where everything's built like there's not a lot of flexibility. It's about rote memorization and things like that. The other big theme, I kind of already talked about it, was teacher quality. I'll go ahead and tell you it's down here. That's kind of what my good big question is for her would be what what is a quality teacher? Like how do you measure that? Because we all have had different experiences with different teachers, and there might have been a teacher that I loved and learned from that other students may not have. So, and does it matter how teachers are certified? I guess these are the big questions, but she does get into that. And again, like I say, I can only speak from my experience. I've been at two universities, and both have kind of set up the same way where they were looking for alternative certifications. Both had graduate level certifications. We had curriculum instructions to help expand knowledge for already certified teachers. And of course, we had the traditional 4-year come into your area certifications. I will say this here at Shepherd, we're actually trying to, well, I shouldn't say we're trying, we have to, the state's mandating it. All 4-year schools are being required with their undergrads only, to go to a year-long residency. So their senior year is actually primarily spent in the field. So, and a lot of states have actually went to that already. And a lot of that is to get people more field ready and maybe get them placed in schools and get familiarity and help with a lot of that. Hopefully I didn't babble too much there. A couple um, facts. I'm not gonna definitely not gonna read this because you can check it out. But on page 51, there was I thought an interesting little thing related to the quote was African American or Black students versus white students in reading achievement, and what were the reasons. Some of it wasn't always what I think the stereotypical reasons why. It wasn't a lot of it related to teacher quality and not just resources and things like that. With all things with well, I should rephrase that. I'm sorry, I'm talking a little quick and reading a little quick. If all things were equal, it related to teacher quality. And what I mean is if the resources were bad in a school that is primarily white, and the resources were bad in a school that was primarily African American or Latino or anything like that, and the teacher quality was the same, the reading scores were the same. And that's something that she wanted to get in. She got into a little bit. She also talks about bottom heavy courses and what she means by that because of the quality of teachers, and maybe teachers aren't certified. Like for example, AP teachers, maybe because they're getting teachers who aren't certified or have certain levels of certification, they can't teach certain courses or certain high level of math. So that's kind of a bottom heavy course where the courses are not as advanced or being offered in schools that are dominated in terms of population by African American, Native American, and Latin American schools. They just have less course offerings. It's kind of like, what is it? The rising tide lifts all ships. It's just not happening. And there's a lot of reasons for that. She also talks about the global gap. And again, it's the gap where basically even our best suburban urban schools and rural part, the teaching, kind of mumbling through that a little bit. Sorry, reset. She's basically saying the gap between what even our best suburban, urban, and rural public schools are teaching and testing versus all students will need to succeed as learners, workers, and I'm kind of butchering that a little bit. Let me pause that. Hey everyone, just in case I bumbled through that last little thing a little bit, I should hopefully have edited this properly and you won't hear all that bumbling, but just in case you do, I'm going to redo this. I had that typed for missing commas. So let me share my screen again. Maybe I'll share my screen again. I told you, I try to do these in one take, and sometimes that works and sometimes that does not. Apologies. There we go. I think we got it all going there. Stop share. All right. Just to restate this, and again, I'll edit the bumbling parts out there before, but the global gap, it's the gap between what our best suburban, urban, and rural schools are teaching and testing versus what all students will need to succeed as workers, learners, and citizens in a global knowledge economy. That was a mouthful, and I apologize. Again, I'll blame the weekend. This is basically what we're teaching versus what the students need to know. That's what I should have really just said. She talks about that. I'm not going to get into it too much though, because she does dip her toes into the concept of flat world, which is good because it talks about other countries and things like that. And she's starting to throw some of that out, and she's going to do it a little more in some later chapters. We're going to do that with the Finnish types book. So I'm going to avoid that right now. And again, the big question, what is a quality educator? I just had that. I would ask her that, and what are the skills, training, and traits needed to help lower this gap that she's talking about between quality teachers and not quality teachers or non-quality teachers. Chapter 3, it's actually just rereading this a little bit today. She gets into test scores and how tests are driving curriculum and instruction changes, especially in schools that are low income and racial and ethnically diverse. And what she means by that is they're just trying to raise their test score so they can get more money for the schools. I guess they're chasing the money, which is understandable because the resources are low, but it's affecting um, the curriculum. It's not creative. It's very just memorization and just get the test scores that you need. And also, if all things were being equal and resources were all equal across the board, you wouldn't have this battle going on, the need for money as much and things like that. And she does get into that. And I kind of alluded to this, and she talks about some different ways some different states are approaching everything, but sometimes less is more with curriculum. And I'm not talking about eliminating subjects, and she's not talking about that either. She makes a point of that. But she's talking in terms of content where, and again, forgive me, and I think I said this disclaimer, I'm an old social studies teacher and I default to that. And when I think a lot of times about like the curriculum in US history, um, a lot of times it's hard to get past World War II into Vietnam and get to the modern age when you look at our standards. I mean, you are almost info dumping. And maybe that's not a good thing. Would you rather your students just you touch base and you can check a box off basically of your standards? Yep, covered this. Or is it better to spend the time and just learn about it? Of course, that gets into your methodology. That could also get into quality teaching, but it's something that she talks about and something we should think about. And again, if we can do this and bring more creative instruction, hopefully it could help with this. And again, I thought the chart that she showed was certified versus not certified or non-certified teachers. There was a huge discrepancy in suburban and major white populated areas. Most of the teachers are certified. It used to be a lot higher, even across the board, but in recent years, there's been a big drop. And now in a lot of schools that are Hispanic, African American, and I should add on there, and I will, Native American. I don't know if Native American was on the chart, but I do know it's true. And I will put that on there. There's just a huge discrepancy. And again, it just gets into, I guess, institutional knowledge. You just know how things work and experience and things like that. So these are some issues that she talks about. She also, there was just two that I kind of threw out there. I am not going to read much about No Child Left Behind, but I did, and I will be the first to admit, I looked at a bunch of different definitions. Probably at a graduate class, this is not the best thing to do, but I did think the Wikipedia one was probably the most straightforward and just to the point. No Child Left Behind was, an old Bush administration policy related to education. It was very test driven about making sure people met certain gaps before they were promoted. She talks about that, and I don't know if I wrote it down, but even sometimes schools would use that to their advantage, where it was the 9th, 10th grade gap. I might be in chapter 4 actually, where she talks about like sometimes students wouldn't be promoted to 10th grade because if they promoted them, it would lower their test scores for 10th grade. So it was better to just keep one set down to try to raise others. There were a lot of issues with it, and I don't know if anyone was in education when the No Child Left Behind was enacted and when it was in place, but it was very controversial. It was basically repealed across the board in 2015 and succeeded by the Every Student Succeeds Act. But No Child Left Behind wanted to make sure I threw that out there for a facts or info because she references it so much. That was kind of, I just mentioned the 9th and 10th grade thing. That was the lost student chart, and that's on page 95 if you want to check it out. My big question from chapter 3 was, what is the best way? Again, this gets a little political, but to level the playing field and resource spending. This is one of those things where I got to thinking, it's like at some point we've all, excuse me, we've got to be real. What is it? Shepherd, we always talk about TARPs or teacher as a reflective practitioner or learner, or be reflective. And sometimes I think you got to be honest with yourself, whether that's as a teacher, a school district. What are ways that we can do to kind of level and get all of our schools resources up to par. Um, eh, West Virginia is a unique example. I mean, if you think about it, some of the issues we have a lot of low socioeconomic areas. I'm not talking really about Berkeley and Jefferson County. I don't know everyone's experiences with West Virginia, but if you travel to other counties, Appalachia has a lot of poor districts, and sometimes bringing that stuff up is it's tricky because they might not have internet service or high quality internet service. Um, the populations are it's a economically depressed area, maybe not having the political pool. I will say this, and I won't mention the county, but there was one school. I had a student teacher who was in a rural county, but it's not too far from here. It was about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I went ahead and she did her student teaching over there, and I went over. School was great. They had just become an Apple school, and the teachers were noting how, like, once they got that into all the schools, it seemed to bring the students seemed to have more access to things. They had computers when a lot of them didn't, and things like that. So that's an example. And I'm not saying technology is an end all be all. It can be very hit or miss. But long story short, I don't know. But one thing I was wondering is how can we, level the playing field? We're going to talk about that a little bit with the countries too. I'm going to tread softly when I say this, but uh, because I don't know how big people are into it, but some countries, like, there's no sports associated with high schools. Now, I'm not saying I'm anti. I played high school sports. I want my son's going into high school next year. I want him to play a few. So I'm not poo-pooing it. It just gets into the idea of spending. Like, if you have a football team and they're playing on a grass field and the county wants field turf, I mean, do you need that? Do you not, when you have 6 million trailers in the back? I mean, which is going to benefit more students, the field turf? That's going to cost you, I don't know how much field turf goes. I would imagine it would be at least over $1 million to install, buy, everything else, or add onto your school or bring your school up. These are things you have to talk about. And maybe it's not even eliminating sports programs, but it's just the spending. And a lot of counties are fighting this, not advocating it, or not advocating it. But it's just, sometimes you got to throw things out and think about the pros and the cons. And that's my way of thinking anyway. You all may have a totally different way to approach it. So that was just something that popped in my head. And of course, with chapter four is a little bit more about money and spending. I have to admit, that's not always my thing, but she kind of gets into the idea of you need to have more flexibility design in educational programs. Um, and again, she points to some places out in the US we're going to look at. She also talks about, I just mentioned it, how money is spent. And that is something that I think politically we have to be realistic about. I mean, where are we getting the most bang for the buck? She does cite, I mean, she does own up to the other side where a lot of people say DC schools are not always the most high performing. They have a lot of money put into DC schools. A lot of people, because of the congressional connections and the way that it's administrated, that she says is an outlier. And she does get into maybe the money's not being spent the way that it should be. And that's kind of what that last point was. The last two facts that I pointed out there, and I'm going to get rid of those because they'll annoy me, are Brown versus Board of Education. I'm assuming everyone knows what that is, but just in case, that was basically, it repealed Plessy versus Ferguson. It's where all students, are supposed to meet the same educational standards. It ended segregation in schools. It's one of the most important, Supreme Court decisions of the 20th century, if not all time. So Brown versus Board of Education. And then, of course, Williams versus California. That was the one where it kind of gets into establishing standards as far as accountability with the way that students have access to resources. I'm very summarizing that, but I had not heard of that one. So reading about it was, I kind of was researching a little bit. I kind of used that definition there. It was on the Public Advocate. The other things that she points out in chapter 4 that I thought were interesting is, if you look, some of the things, there's been some good and bad since Brown in terms of African American, Latino, and other groups in the expansion of high schools. High school graduations have really risen since then. But then she also gets into how since the 70s, there's a few things like reading scores and all that have dropped, and especially math. So she does outline that, and there's definitely themes. She has a lot of charts in there, and hopefully you're getting a look at a few. But that's kind of ended up being my big question is how do we change the mindset on where money is spent? Should we? I should even put on there, should we? That was kind of my overview of the readings. you can have your own. You do not have to echo mine, but I like to at least, since we're not meeting face to face, I like to at least act like I'm having a little bit of a discussion with you. That is the nuts and bolts of that. I will post this actually if you're interested, and forgive any typos. I kind of was going to do all these different things, and then I just decided, this might be the best way to do it is just type up my notes on here. Most weeks we won't have 4 chapters; it'll be just 2. A few other things I wanted to point out. One, the discussion board is up. I'll probably have this open on Saturday evening when you're getting this when I'm recording. I try to open early if I can, and you are welcome to go onto it. It's basically there's the discussion posts, but it's just to I want to know, how do you think we can get more quality teachers in schools and a more balance in funding and resources in today's political climate? You don't have to be I mean, it's just be your ideas. I mean, I think it's just good to throw things out and what you think it could be related to pay, it could be related to something with students, might be even how teacher certification programs work. I don't know where everyone went. If you went to Shepherd, maybe there's things that we should do better or things that you like that we need to stress more. If you went to WVU, if you went to University of Maryland, wherever, you can highlight some of that. Maybe you don't feel there's an issue and you can state those reasons why. All good. The other thing, I posted this, but it was in a terrible spot, and I saw a few people have gotten to it. I reposted the introduction. If you didn't get a chance to do that, if you could take a minute just to kind of tell everyone where you're from and things like that. Remember, you don't have to reply, but if you want to, you can. And also, I put 2 other things on here. You will notice I'm probably going to go ahead and move this up under here so you can see it. I put an article on Jonathan Kozol. He was someone I had to read in my doctoral work a lot. Things, I guess, with a lot of things, a lot of works. There's some things I agree with and some things I don't. But she references him a lot in the work, especially in that first chapter, I think. So if you're interested in who Jonathan Kozol is, he's written a lot on education, especially on education inequalities in terms of resources and funding and things like that. He actually has went into a lot of inner city schools and worked with them, especially a lot of elementary schools and like some of the problems they've had. He is an interesting read. I think it's Savage. Oh, I think it's Savage Inequality. I'm gonna have to look him up now. My son's on my computer all the time. Let's try this. I'm scared to pull that up. Who knows what he actually was looking at? I did see some Harry and Meghan stuff on there. That was probably me. See what's going on. Let's see. All right, let's do it. Jonathan Kozol. Whoops. I spelled that totally, but that's okay. Hopefully it'll still pull him up. There you go. Sorry. It was Savage Inequalities. I was going to say that was one of the ones that I read a long time ago, and then there's a whole bunch here. But he writes a lot on this issue about inequalities within schools, and she references him. So wanted to make sure you had a little bit. It's a New York Times article, and you're welcome to check it out. It just kind of gives a nice overview. Also, I do want to talk about this a little bit later as we get into some of the works, but about curriculum. But I wanted to go ahead and put it up here because I do think this is something we always have to think about is balanced curriculum. She keeps mentioning different types of curriculum and expanding it and all. Again, forgive me, I just with social studies, it's always something on my mind, and I just had methods, and we were talking a little bit about this, but I don't know how familiar everyone is with the Battles of the 1619 Project. That's the one where it talks about United States history starting basically from 1609, and it's kind of, I guess, from a slavery lens. I don't want to make it sound like it's just that. It gets into the history and things like that, but some schools have fought it, some haven't, and I think there are some things in it that I think need definitely you can pull like all things from that you can, and then there's some things that a lot of historians don't like. What I'm battling through here is basically, if you want to check it out, it's one of those things where I think you do have to look at your content through the lens of your students and maybe what will grab them and make things interesting. And if this is something, it might be something you might want to incorporate at least parts of. You might not. I don't know. I know some counties and school districts are very anti-adopting it, and some have. So I just wanted to throw it out there if you want to check it out. And that kind of leads me to, I know I'm babbling for a good bit today. But I do want to go ahead and throw next week's assignment, just so you know, is the Zen project. It's a pretty straightforward assignment, but let me pull it up here and I'll go ahead and I'll cover it in the next video too, just so everyone has it. But if you want to go ahead and do it, that's fine. If you want to work a little bit ahead, you just click assignments and it's there. What you have to do, Howard Zinn was another person who he's contro he is slightly controversial. He looks at things through what he calls people's history. And people's history is like instead of a hero history, like looking at things just through presidents and things like that. That kind of gets in that curriculum I was talking about with the 1619 project. Basically, what you have to do is you have to go to the Zen project. I'm actually signed up on their emails. They send a lot of materials out. Some of it I like, some of it again I don't. I'm a little wishy-washy with stuff. But I just want you to kind of go through it. And I don't know everyone's content area. And I know social studies, I don't want this just to be a social studies thing. So definitely look at your different themes and see if there's anything you think you might be able to use. I want you to, and if you don't find anything you can use, at least give me some things that you think are interesting. And let me pull that back up. There it is. There is a chart that's on there already. You can just put the theme. So for example, it could be African American history. What's the resource you found on the Zen? You can just post it or give a little summary. And then you can say, just a bullet or two about the diversity connection and why you think it's important. It could be like it could expand my curriculum because I don't cover enough Brazilian history or something like that. And I'll use a case in point. When I used to teach, this was actually a community college class, but I remember, talking to one of my students, awesome student. He said, "I love the class, but I wish you'd do more African history." And I thought about it. I was like, well, I told him, I said, "Don't we do that?" And he said, "Yeah, but it's through exploration and things." And I thought he was right. It was more from a European lens, is what I'm getting at. So, and that's been many moons ago. And I was always conscious of that. So maybe, be a little reflective in how you can incorporate some stuff. But that's it. You do 20 of these and you just submit the list. That is actually not this week, though. That's for next week. But for you people who like to work ahead, I wanted to go ahead and get that out there. The link is there. And actually, let me just pull one up. Let's just do, I like Cold War history, so I'll pull that up. And maybe I want to look at it through Asian American. And see, there's audio, there's nonfiction. You can kind of talk about what the resource is. And that's what I'm talking about. What's the audio? Let's go. Let's check it out. And there you go. And it's an audio version from, read by Matt Damon. There you go. Dreams do come true. He used it in Good Will Hunting. But if you click and you check it out, and there's Harper Audio. So, and don't worry if you don't have access. I'm sure, like a lot of things, they're probably still looking for you to buy something. Just you can read the overview and kind of give it. That's fine. I just want you to get an idea of the resources. That is the week. I apologize. I know that was wordy. I really was trying to rush and not make this overly long. And that one part where I was butchering, hopefully I'll get that edited out. But just in case, I apologize if it's a little clunky there right around the middle. So with that being said, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. We're on week 2. This week, you just really have to read chapters 3 and 4 and view this video for better or for worse, and do discussion 2. But you're welcome to go ahead and start working and submit the Zen. And if you need it, you just click up on assignments. And next week it'll be embedded in there. Again, I'll be out talking too much. I'll tell everyone bye. Hope everything started off smooth for you.